Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our presentations tonight. The first presentation that we're going to look at is we're going to be studying the liver. The liver lives under your right rib, and your liver is the main organ in charge of detoxification. And understanding how the liver does that helps to have the knowledge on how to treat the body and how to encourage the body to be able to go through detoxification. Why do we need detoxification? We are exposed to, it is estimated, about 100,000 new chemicals every year. Environmental poisons are everywhere. So 150 years ago, there wasn't a lot. And even with the clothes that people wear, it was mostly made out of natural fibre. But today, we are exposed to so many, and sometimes in hidden ways, and we did touch on that a little. So I'd like to look at how the liver does go through detoxification. And the proverb 14 verse 6, where it says, "Knowledge is easy to him that understands." I like to give you a understanding of the liver, and when you have an understanding of the liver, you begin to have a knowledge on how to treat it. So let's have a look at your liver. Your liver lives under your right rib. Here's liver. And your liver is the largest internal organ in the body. The largest organ is actually the skin. But the largest internal organ in the body is the liver, and cancer cannot get a hold on the body if the liver's working at optimum performance, so that makes it very attractive. Also, the liver is the only organ that has the ability to regrow. So someone can have a part liver transplant, and that part that's transplanted can actually grow. So there are a few very interesting facts about the liver. I call the liver the project manager, and in my book Self-Heal by Design, I've devoted a whole chapter to the project manager of the liver. I call it the project manager because everything that comes into the body goes to the liver, and the liver determines where it goes. Now, if environmental poisons come in, they go to the liver does a quick assessment. Sometimes it can break it down to a state that can be easily released, but sometimes it just has to wrap it up in fat and store it. So everybody, no matter who you are, everybody has some environmental poisons stored up in their fat cells. I had a guy do our program. He's a Vietnam veteran, and in the Vietnam War, the soldiers were exposed to a lot of chemicals. And he's a little bit overweight, and his doctor said to him, "Don't lose weight. Just stay the way you are." And I know why. It's because when he starts to lose weight, what's going to start to be released is those chemicals, those nasty chemicals that the liver wrapped up in fat and stored. But I'd like, first of all, to have a look at food. And this will also be an introduction to our next lecture, where we'll be looking at diabetes. And never in the history of mankind have human beings eaten so many carbohydrates. So let's have a look at what a carbohydrate is. The old word in the old days for carbohydrates was starches. And so let's have a look. What would most people have for breakfast? Cereal. There's a whole aisle devoted to cereal, and there's a whole aisle devoted to bread. And also cakes, cookies, biscuits, donuts, so we're going to say cakes, etc. And pizza, another fast food. Pasta, another fast food. Rice, another fast food. Potatoes. And then last and certainly least in nutritive value is the pure crystallized acid that's been extracted from the sugarcane plant. So whether people are vegetarian, whether they are meat eaters, they still, I find, carbohydrates make up a very large part of their diet. Now all of these foods break down in the gut to glucose. And glucose is the number one fuel used by every cell in the body. So again, as promised, we're going to go to the CBD, the Central Business District of the human body. The glucose goes in. And it goes in under the action of insulin. We'll be looking at that in more detail in our next presentation. And it goes through a 20-step pathway. And this 20-step pathway gives us 2 units of energy. The end result of the 20-step pathway is a chemical form of glucose called pyruvate. And pyruvate, as the chemical form of glucose, gets fed into the next section, an 8-step pathway. And this 8-step pathway delivers 36 units of energy. What a difference oxygen makes. And we touched on this yesterday when we were looking at cancer cells. And this pathway here, no oxygen. But there's still a lot of glucose left over when a person's on a high carbohydrate diet. First place it gets sent is to the cell. And now the liver causes some of the excess to be stored as glycogen. This is a name given to quick-release glucose stores. And it looks like a little bunch of grapes, but it's actually little molecules of glucose, already sitting in the muscle cell. But on a high carbohydrate diet, we've still got glucose left over. And so now it gets stored in the most amazing fuel depot in the body, which is fat. So the second place it goes to is glycogen stores, and the third place is as fat. Now what I have given you here is the basic science. This is what happens on a high carbohydrate diet. But with the liver, as I mentioned to you, when the environmental poisons come in, they are stored in the fat cells. And there's a very famous diet, Dr. Robert Atkins, he made this diet very, very famous back in the 1980s. Gary Taube, he also did an assessment of this low carbohydrate diet, and he showed way back in the 1850s, there was a famous doctor named Claude Bernard, and Claude Bernard, he believed as Antoine Beauchamp did, not as Pasteur did. And Gary Taube was a businessman putting on a bit of excess weight, so he went to Claude Bernard, and Claude Bernard took him off all starches. So that means the carbohydrates would drastically drop. So it actually didn't start with Atkins, it started even way back. So what did his patients eat? They ate lots of vegetables, here's your fibre. They ate lots of meat, butter, cream, cheese, eggs, here's your protein, here's your fats. And Dr. Claude Bernard obviously knew his science, because when this businessman went on that diet, the weight just fell off him. Can you see why? And this is actually how it worked with Atkins too. So William Banting went on the diet. He was a bit surprised that he had to stop all the carbohydrates. What did he eat? Lots of vegetables. Lots of meat, butter, cream, cheese, eggs. You see, when you don't give the body carbohydrates, the fat cells are broken down to give the glucose that you need. It's called gluconeogenesis, creating new glucose from the stored fat. Dr. Atkins found the same thing. Dr. Atkins' book was #1 on the New York Times best-selling book list 4 years running. But aren't I a plant-based diet person? I am. And didn't Atkins use a lot of meat, butter, cream, cheese, eggs? He did, but his science was correct. But you can do it on a vegetarian diet. Let me show you. On a vegetarian diet, on a plant-based diet, let's have a look at the food. Let's have a look at the protein content and the carbohydrate content. So God said to Adam and Eve, "Behold, I've given you every herb-bearing seed." A seed is a grain. Another seed is a legume, or we'll say bean, fits in better. And another seed is a seed. So you've got wheat, barley, rye, oats, amaranth, quinoa, millet, so many grains. Grains are high in protein and they are very high in carbohydrate. How many on our carbohydrate list are from grain? So we've got grain, 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 the majority. What's a bean? Lentils, chickpeas, lima beans, black-eyed beans, cannellini beans, kidney beans. Did I say lentils? So many beans. Beans are high in protein, but most people don't realise they are medium to low in carbohydrate. They are about a third the carbohydrate content that you will find in the grain. And you'll find many books like the Paleo Diet, the FODMAP Diet, Beach Diet, Zone Diet, that are talking about the low carbohydrate diet. They say stop the legumes because they have carbohydrates. Well, they do, but not much. Seed. So with a seed you've got pumpkin seed, sesame seed, sunflower seed, chia seed, cannellini. No, that's back to the legumes. Chia seed, flaxseed or linseed. The seeds are high in carbohydrates and quite low. They're high in protein, low in carbohydrates. And then God said, and every tree, in the which of the tree is a fruit-bearing seed. What's a fruit-bearing seed? That's your nut. All your nuts come from the fruit of the tree. So with your nuts, you've got pecan, walnut, cashew, Brazil, almond, hazelnut, macadamia nut, so many nuts. They're high in protein and low in carbohydrate. And what Dr. Atkins found when he researched this, because he was surprised at the results he was getting, he just did it for weight loss. But after he had dramatic weight loss, he put some of his patients on it, there are more of his patients on it, and after a year, what he discovered was that his cancer patients were going into remission. And do you remember why? The cancer cells consume 15 times the glucose, that's a fast pathway. And so on this low carbohydrate diet, low delivery of glucose, the cancer cells were not able to function. His diabetics were coming off their medication, and I'll look at that in more detail in our next lecture. Incredible results. What he discovered was that these are the three essential food groups. Fiber's essential because the colon needs to be swept every day. And it's in the fibre part of most vegetables. That means just under the skin where you find a concentration of your nutrients, especially in the potato. I'm so glad we don't peel potatoes anymore. Protein's an essential nutrient. Yesterday we looked at the DNA, we looked at the crossword bands. They're made up of amino acids. If you don't have sufficient protein, you cannot function, you cannot heal. Protein is essential. That's why my son James inherited my body type, little. A boy doesn't want to be little, he wants to be muscly. Well, James changed his body type by strong workout sessions and increasing protein. All your bodybuilders, what do? They increase their protein because that builds muscle. Fat is an essential nutrient. 50% of the membrane around every cell in the body is protein. 50% of the membrane around every cell in the body is fat. Whether you're 100 kilos or 200 or 300 kilos, this is the membrane around the cell. Fat is an essential nutrient, but not the brain cell. 70% fat is the brain cell. Fat is an essential nutrient. What he also discovered was that the non-essential food group is carbohydrates. And that's why on William Banting's diet, on Dr. Atkins' diet, with this very low carbohydrate, the people weren't sick, the people actually prospered. I have a friend, his name's Dr. Carl Benjamin in New York. He said to me, I used to be one of Atkins' patients. He said I was diabetic, or pre-diabetic, and he said I was carrying a little bit too much weight. So back in the 80s, he went to Dr. Atkins. Dr. Atkins put him on meat. He'd been a vegetarian all his life. But he was eating huge carbs. That's where the weight was coming from. That's why the diabetes was happening. He said, I wasn't very happy with it, but he said Dr. Atkins was a very gracious man, and he didn't put me on as much meat and eggs as he usually did. He said, I never got diabetes. He said, the weight just fell off me. But he said, I've come to see you because I'm getting arthritis now. This meat is giving me arthritis because meat is an acid food. And he was very interested in my presentation because he said, you are the first vegetarian that hasn't slammed Atkins. You can't deny that his book wasn't #1 on the New York Times best-selling book list. And then Carl Benjamin said something that I agree with and I thought was astonishing. He said, I believe if Dr. Atkins had read the China study, Dr. Atkins would have become a vegetarian. Because the China study, Dr. Colin Campbell, he could switch cancer cells on and off by the amount of meat and dairy he was giving them. Because meat is a very acid food. The only way Atkins got away with it was that his patients had to eat 3 cups of vegetables a day. And one of those cups had to be greens. That's what brought in the alkaline. That's how we got away with it. Interesting. I always want to know why. God put it into us, didn't he? There's always a reason. So I call it the modified Atkins. His theory was correct. But you can do superior by eating your beans, seeds and nuts every day, by eating lots of vegetables. Now, carbohydrates are not bad. I feel so sad when someone quotes me as saying carbohydrates are not bad. Of course they're not bad. It's only when they're overdone and refined. And I meet so many vegetarians that are having cereal and toast for breakfast, sandwiches for lunch, pasta for tea, or maybe they're having their main meal at lunch and having a lot of pasta and a lot of rice, a lot of potatoes. And their evening meal, that's right, you call it supper, is maybe a sandwich. Can you see high carbohydrate? And in my next lecture, I'll show you the carbohydrate that is the most dangerous, which is what they're all made out of. It's wheat. But we'll pursue that a little bit more in the next lecture. I'm going to show you why I have made such a startling statement. There is good reason. So, we have seen many prosper by going on this diet. So your carbohydrates, they're your negotiating part of the meal. And the negotiations change depending on your height, your weight, your size, your age, your sex. I eat much less carbohydrates now compared to when I was breastfeeding or pregnant. And of course my body's needs were more when I was breastfeeding or pregnant. And so that's your negotiating part of the meal. Never negotiate your fibre, protein and fat, because they're the 3 essentials. but negotiate your carbohydrate part of the meal. I was talking to my son James, he's big and muscly now. He still works out. He said, "Mum, this is exactly what bodybuilding.com say. Remember the athletes used to carb load? Not anymore, because the carb gives them a rush and then a dump. Whereas the fibre, protein and fat, that gives this steady, consistent delivery of fuel." So what's the liver doing today? What's the liver doing today when someone has just begun a detox? So I'm going to show you what the liver does when a person goes through a detox. At the retreat in Alabama, Living Springs Retreat, the guests come in Sunday, so Monday, Tuesday are juicing days. So they have their last meal, Sunday lunch, then they just have a light soup at night, no fibre. So they really start the fast from then. And they do 2 days on juices. So what are the juices? Predominantly 80% carrot, and 20% celery. Sorry, the last 2 is 20. This is 10. 10% celery and 10% apple. Now this juice is called the vegetarian juice, sometimes nicknamed the vegetarian milk, because you could just about subsist on that. I met a lady whose baby could not take her breast milk, could not take any milk, not even nut milk or soy milk. And she went to a naturopath. This baby had a skin disease. And so the naturopath put the baby on this for milk. And the baby prospered on that. So what we do at Misty Mountain and also at Living Springs Retreat, these are the 5 juices in the day: 8 a.m, 10 a.m, 12 midday, 2 p.m, and 4 p.m. So they're the 5 juices that are served in a day. And they are predominantly carrot, celery and apple juice. Sometimes we do half carrot, half cucumber. Sometimes we do half carrot, half cucumber and put greens in. Sometimes we do 70% carrot, 10% celery, 10% apple and 10% beetroot, or you call it beet. So we do a few variations, and sometimes we put a little ginger in, and so they are predominantly, that is the juice. And as I take you through the 3 stages of the liver detox, you will understand why it is so important to do the juices. So let me show you the 3 stages of the liver detox, and then I'll show you the liver's requirements at every stage. So when a person has their last meal on the Sunday, by Monday morning, the detox has begun. And what happens is the fat cells start to get broken down because the juice isn't quite enough for their body to properly function. So some of the fat cells are getting broken down to release the excess glucose they need. And as the fat cells get broken down, the fat-soluble toxins that have been coming into the body all through the life are starting to be released. That's why when someone goes on a fast, their body odour might be a little worse than normal, their breath might be a little worse than normal, what they're releasing in the toilet, the smell might be a little worse than normal, because the fat cells are releasing, once again, the fat-soluble toxins as they're getting broken down. Once again, they're back in the bloodstream. Once again, they're back to the liver. The liver's just about to say, wrap it up in fat and store it, and the liver sees that they're at the health retreat and they're getting peak nutrients. So the liver says, we can break this down to a water-soluble state. The body cannot release it in a fat-soluble state. It has to be broken down to a water-soluble state. And so what the liver does in phase 1, it takes the fat-soluble toxin and it breaks it down to a metabolite. Metabolite simply means first stage of metabolism. This metabolite is worse than the fat-soluble toxin. This metabolite creates a lot of free radicals, and free radicals damage the tissues. This metabolite creates something 100 times, sometimes, more toxic, especially in the case of alcohol, 100 times more toxic than it originally was. This metabolite is highly volatile. So metabolite simply means the first stage of breakdown, or the first stage of this metabolism, breaking it down. And so you may say to yourself, what is the liver doing? It's just created something worse than it originally was. It's a process. It's like when you clean the garden shed out. It looks 100 times messier halfway through, doesn't it? Because you've pulled everything out. Kitchen cupboards looks 100 times messier halfway through. And it's a process. And your liver has certain needs as it goes through this process. In phase 1, it needs antioxidants. Antioxidants have a nickname, and that is free radical scavengers. You see, you've got an atom and you've got 4 electrons and 4 protons. And what happens is when this electron goes, that's a free radical. And antioxidants come along with lots of free radicals to put it on. And one of the problems is this atom, when it loses its electron, it'll take it from this atom. And now that atom becomes an electron. Sorry, a free radical. Because it's lost its electron. And so when you add lots of antioxidants, you are adding lots of electrons. So that's why they're called free radical scavengers. They mop it up. So the most potent antioxidant is beta-carotene. And beta-carotene is found in all your green and your orange-coloured vegetables. So that the juices that we serve are usually either green or red from the beetroot, or orange. Another potent antioxidant is vitamin C. And vitamin C is not ascorbic acid. Ascorbic acid is like the envelope. Have you ever got an envelope in the mail and there's nothing in it? It's useless. When you buy vitamin C, make sure you buy vitamin C with bioflavonoids. Because when you get vitamin C and bioflavonoids, you're getting the whole C. Vitamin E is a fat-soluble vitamin. So there are the 3 most potent antioxidants. And I'm going to add these 2 because they're not antioxidants, but your liver does need them in the detox. Minerals and vitamin B. At our retreats, we encourage our guests to have a crystal of Celtic salt with every glass of water because it has 82 minerals in it. Our juices are predominantly organic, so they're very high in minerals. At night we cook up a lot of vegetables and a lot of water, strain it, and the people are drinking that. We call it broth. It's very high in minerals. Within 36 hours of beginning of a detox program, phase 2 kicks in. In phase 2, the liver takes this highly toxic, highly volatile metabolite and it joins it together with amino acids. So the union of this highly toxic metabolite with the amino acids is actually a joining together The union of this highly toxic metabolite and the amino acids produces the water-soluble state. And in a water-soluble state, it can be easily released out of your body. So phase 2 needs, what's the needs of phase 2? Phase 2 needs protein. So what we do at our retreats, let me explain it. So you've got the 8, 10, 12, 2, 4 juices on Monday. And on Tuesday, you've also got the 8, 10, 12, 2 and 4 juices. On Monday, we serve a green barley. So I'm just going to put a G here at 8, at 12 and at 4. On Tuesday, we serve it at 10 and 2. Whereas on Monday and Tuesday, we also serve protein drink. So the protein drink on Monday is served at 10. The protein drink on Monday is served at 2. But on Tuesday, we're now going into 36 hours since the start of the detox. Now the requirements for amino acids increases. So on Monday, we only serve it twice, but on Tuesday, we serve it at 8, at 12, and at 4. If we have someone doing our program who's a farmer who's had a lot of exposure to chemicals, a printer who's had a lot of exposure to chemicals, a cleaner who's had a lot of exposure to chemicals, a Vietnam veteran who had a lot of exposure to chemicals, we serve protein every single juice, both days. Because what's coming out of them is so toxic, they need extra amino acids to mop it up. But we find the majority of people go well with this program. My attention was first brought to this, maybe 18 years ago now, because we've been running retreats for 23 years now. And I had a man do our program who was about 44. He'd had a bit of exposure to chemicals. And we did not used to do the protein at all, because at that stage I was unaware of that way the liver detoxifies. And on Tuesday at 2 o'clock, I get a call. Anton needs to speak to you immediately. I came in, I said, what is it, Anton? He said, I feel terrible. He said, I've got this terrible headache. I feel ill. He said, it's as if my body is just screaming out for some protein. I said, I hear you. Now, I didn't know why, but I've got to listen. His body's telling him he needs protein. So I went down and I made him a nice hefty protein drink, pea protein, almond milk, a bit of coconut cream. I saw him half an hour later. He said, thank you. That is so much better. Now, I went home that day thinking, why? Why did he respond so well to protein? It was another year before I discovered it. When I did my nutrition course, we studied the 3 phases of the liver detox every module. This is 10 modules. I have simplified it gratefully for you. This information has only been known since 2002. And this is why Dr. Atkins, he did not know about the 3 phases of the liver detox, but when you consider his diet, it had all the nutrients necessary to support the 3 phases of the liver detox. How many people include protein when they're on a fast? They don't. And we are dealing with more fat-soluble toxins than any generation who's ever lived on the planet. And I believe And I see it in the retreats. We have seen so many people heal. We have seen so many people go through this program very successfully. Since we have been introducing the protein. And because it's a pea protein, it is a pre-digested pea protein, we want to bypass digestion. Because if you have digestion, you're not fasting. And that's why we strain all the fibre out of everything, because you want to fast. Because when you go on a fast, the body starts to break down your fat cells. That's why it's often called a detox, a cleanse, because you're cleansing the body of the built-up environmental poisons. Phase 2 is followed by phase 3. In phase 3, the liver takes the water-soluble toxin and it releases it quite easily out via your sweat glands, via your urine, and also via your colon. It can be released quite easy as a fat soluble. I mean, it cannot be released as a fat soluble, but this 3-phase of the liver detox brings it down to a water soluble state, and then it can easily be sweated out, urinated out via the colon. And it explains so much. It also explains why it is not a good idea to do a water fast today. It is not a good idea to do a 10-day fast today. Because we have got so many fat-soluble toxins built up in us. You are far better to do 2 days a week, every week, for a couple of months, than to do a 10-day water fast. I had a guest come to our program and she said, I did a 10-day water fast. She said, I just had full-on vomiting and diarrhoea. And she said, my attendants told me I was going through a detox. I said, you are going through a liver crisis. Because if you don't supply the protein that the liver needs to mop up these toxic metabolites, you can lose up to 25% liver function loss. And we don't want to lose liver function. I had a lady from China attend our program. Her name was Miss Chin, and she had sold her house so she could come to our retreat. This is about 18 years ago when I was just discovering this, maybe 15 years ago. She had breast cancer, and when she arrived, I could hardly believe my eyes. She was brought in on a stretcher. Now, we are not a hospital, and I say to our guests, we are not a hospital. We cannot give hospital care. We're a health retreat, and our main aim is teaching. So if someone needs care, they can come if they come with a carer, because we are not a hospital. We don't have that sort of care. And she was very, very thin, and the cancer on her breast was very, very large. Whoa, the plane trip had just wiped her out of it. If someone's not well and they go on a long plane trip, that can really wipe them out. I said, oh dear, she said, I wasn't like this when I left. And when I talked to her, she started to tell me what she'd been doing. I said, what have you been doing for the last 2 years? She said, fasting, raw diet, fasting, raw diet, fasting, raw diet. How much protein is there on most fasts and most raw diets? Very, very little. So without realising it, all this fasting and all this raw diet was supplying lots of beta-carotenes, lots of C's, a little bit of E, so it was stimulating phase 1, but not phase 2. So all these toxic metabolites were being created, but no amino acids to mop them up. The liver was starting to break down in an attempt to try and provide the amino acids. And she was getting thinner and thinner and sicker. I did not fast that lady at all. That lady now needed to be built up. Her body needed to be built up. And so we started feeding her 3 meals a day. She was so thin. She made me look quite big. Her arms were like this. So we gave her lots of vegetables. We gave her protein, well prepared. The legumes were well soaked, well rinsed several times. We gave her a diet that had some raw and some cooked. You see, 1 cup of lentils will give you 15 grams of protein. 1 cup of lentil sprouts will give you 6.5 grams of protein. When you sprout your legumes, you bring them back to a plant, so you lower their protein level. Miss Chin got stronger every day. Miss Chin was walking in a couple of days. I took Miss Chin to the doctor. I said to the doctor, and the doctor said to me, "What do you want me to do?" I said, "Just assess." Because I have to tell you, I did not believe that she would live. And if someone dies at a health retreat, can you imagine what they do? I just wanted an assessment that in case she did pass, we had a covering there. And he certainly acknowledged that this lady possibly only had a week to live. So we fed Miss Chin every day. We put her out in the sunshine every day, and we got the sun on that breast. We had to put a mosquito net over her and a fly net, because in Australia, have you heard of the Australian salute? Flies. And the flies just wanted to go there, so we put a little net over her so she could get that sun. She was getting stronger and stronger. And after 2 weeks, I contacted her family and I said, "My suggestion is that you take Miss Chin home. She's a lot stronger now and she will cope with the flight, because she may pass, and if she does, it's going to be a big trouble for you if it's in Australia. Better for her to go home, because she can just continue to do what we have taught her to do." I see the retreats as teachers, teaching people how to go home and be their own doctors and give their body the right conditions for healing. I don't know what happened to Miss Chin, but we did hear from her 3 months later. She was ordering some more herbs. I was shocked. She was still alive. Maybe she made it, I don't know. We didn't hear again. But it is an illustration to show that when your body, your liver, starts to detox through those 3 phases, it needs support. It needs nutritional support. So at our retreats, we nutritionally support the liver to effectively be able to detoxify us. We nutritionally support the body. And what we have found is we rarely have anyone going through discomfort on the 2 days of the detox. The only discomfort experienced is by the coffee drinkers, because we don't serve coffee. And if people say to me, "Do you drink coffee, Barbara?" I say, "No, I just watch the people suffer." Now, we have lots we can do to bring them relief. We give them hot foot baths, we put cool on their head, we massage their shoulders. And I have had people say to me, "I tried stop coffee at home and I had a terrible headache for 2 weeks. I came to your retreat and I only had a terrible headache for a day." And we're able to bring a little bit of relief with some herbs and some water treatments. Also, the steam saunas that we do at night or in the late afternoon, they are stimulating the sweat glands, so a lot of waste is released, more waste than usual. And I think that's why the people recover so quickly. So how can we support the liver? We can certainly support the liver with nutrition, but there are herbs There are herbs that directly affect the liver, and you might be surprised at the number one liver herb. The number one liver herb is the humble lemon. Every home should have a lemon tree. We call this one a sweet bitter. No, the lemon is not sweet, but compared to some of the herbs I'm going to show you in it, you might call it a sweet bitter. And that's why it's a good idea to have a squeeze of lemon in your warm water in the morning. I always have pure when I wake up, but often with my lemon water, that's the one I'll have half an hour before I eat. It's a wonderful tonic for the liver. Remember, the liver's a recoverable organ. Dandelion is a very bitter herb, and it can be used as the leaf or as the root. St. Mary's thistle, I think in the US you call it milk thistle. It's the same thing. It's a very bitter herb. Another bitter herb is gentian. And a sweet bitter is ginger. In my book, Self-Heal by Design, I give the recipe for a liver tea, and it uses these herbs. Another herb that I have there is golden seal. Golden seal is a very expensive herb, and so compared to these parts, which would be one part, it would only be half a part of golden seal. It's very concentrated and very bitter and very expensive, so just a little bit is needed. In my book, Self-Heal by Design, I also include a liver cleanse. And there is a way that you can cleanse the liver. And this liver cleanse specifically is designed to eliminate gallstones. Now, a traditional recipe for a gallbladder cleanse is to drink half a cup of olive oil and half a cup of lemon juice or grape juice before you go to bed. Yeah, it's a bit tough, drinking that much. But the theory is that the gallbladder releases huge amounts of bile to cope with that large amount of oil, and in the process throws out some little gallstones. And that's been used in retreats all across Europe for centuries. But there is a gentler one. So let me introduce you to the gentler liver cleanse. And it's over 5 days. So it's a 5 days liver cleanse. And day one, and forgive me, but the exact ingredients is in the book, but it's approximately 1 tablespoon of olive oil and 1 tablespoon of lemon and 1 clove of garlic. And this is blended and it is drunk. And to help your body cope with that, I think then there's a cup of the bitter tea. Now that's day one. So day two, it's 2 tablespoons of olive oil, 2 tablespoons of lemon, and 2 cloves of garlic. Day 3, 3 tablespoons of olive oil, 3 tablespoons of lemon, and 3 cloves of garlic. Day 4, back to 2. 2 olive oil, 2 lemon, 2 garlic. Day 5, back to 1. 1 oil, 1 lemon, and 1 garlic. So can you see it's a gentle one? It slowly builds up and then it slowly builds down. And even though it's a little bit gentler, it is quite an effective liver cleanse and a lot easier to take. Meanwhile, there is a compress that you can use that little by little can break up the gallstones, and that's the castor oil compress. And the castor oil compress is laid over the gallbladder liver area, which is under your right rib. And you lay down some plastic and then you put a few layers. If it's flannel, like a wool, you might just put 2 layers. If it's a toweling material, you might put a couple of layers. If it's a thinner cotton, you might put about 8 layers. And then you put the castor oil on like this. It's very thick oil. And then you just let it sit. And you just let it sit for about 20 minutes, and little by little that oil will soak through. And as it soaks through, it spreads out a little bit more. And then that's soaked right through and in. So it'll just cover about that much. And then when it goes on your hot body, then the oil spreads out a little bit more. So can you see why you only put it on the middle part? Because as it soaks in and as your comes into contact with your hot body, which will thin the oil, it spreads out a little bit more. Castor oil penetrates deeper than any other oil, and it has the ability to break up even bone spurs, so it can break up gallstones and it can break up kidney stones in the back. Now, it's not one application that will do it. How long will it take? It depends how long they've been there. But the key is consistency. Try and wear it over the gallbladder liver area at least for 5 hours a day, for at least 5 days a week. And if you want to wear it 24/7, 7 days a week, you can. You can't overdo it. But little by little, that oil will penetrate through and it'll break up those gallstones. It can also help to break up congestion in the liver. So even just putting it on the liver area can be very helpful. After about 2 days, you might find it a little drier, and then you put maybe another teaspoon of castor oil on there. You can use that same compress for about a month, because it's not drawing anything out of you, it's just a vehicle to hold the oil to go into you, to break up those stones, or to cleanse and break up any obstructions or cysts or even tumours on that liver area. And there is a Bible verse to help you here. It's Galatians 6 verse 9. In Galatians 6 verse 9, the Bible says, "Let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we will reap if we faint not." In other words, don't stop. Keep doing it. Keep doing it. Keep doing it. A lady said, "Well, I stopped because I didn't know whether it was doing anything." I said, "Don't stop. You've got nothing to lose and much to gain." And so that's how the liver detoxifies us. What if you're not on a fast? Can the liver still be detoxifying? It can. It particularly does it in a fast. But you've possibly heard of time-restricted eating, intermittent fasting, 5-2 diet. With intermittent fasting, or the time-restricted eating, so look up TRE, time-restricted eating. It's the most popular way to eat today, and it's eating twice in a 24-hour period, 6 hours apart. So what that does is that gives an 18-hour fast every 24 hours. So some people choose to eat at 9 o'clock in the morning and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And a lot of people that are retired eat like that because it's very easy, especially if they're gardeners. They'll garden until the heat of the day, and then they'll have their breakfast and then their main meal mid-afternoon. It doesn't suit everyone, because if people are going to school or going to work, they have to have their breakfast before they leave, and that might be 7 in the morning. Then they have to have their lunch. Their lunch is between 12 and 1. So if they do want to do this, they make breakfast and lunch more substantial. How do you make it more substantial? Your 3 essentials: fibre and protein and fat. So if you make breakfast and lunch more substantial, and by the way, these are the 3 foods that keep the food in the stomach longer, then just have the evening a bit lighter. And if you want to continue that 18-hour fast, your evening might be a thin soup. It might be a vegetable juice. then you would not be having the fibre, and you'd definitely be doing that 18-hour fast. And some people will just do the weekend on the time-restricted eating because they have to have an early breakfast and a midday lunch, and then some might need a little something at night. So it's basically up to you, but when you implement that time-restricted eating and have that 18-hour fast, your body's constantly allowing your liver to do that little bit of a detox. And little by little by little, it lets go of the environmental poisons that have been built up over many years.